The arrow whistled past Celestin Whitmore's ear, embedding itself in the oak tree with a sharp thud that made her heart skip. She pressed her back against the rough bark, clutching the water bucket that had been her excuse to venture beyond the settlement's protective walls. Through the morning mist, she could see him, the Comanche warrior who had been haunting her dreams for weeks, his bronze skin gleaming as he lowered his bow. "You come here every dawn," Coyote said in perfect English, his voice carrying the authority of a man born to lead. "Why?" Celestin's breath caught. She had thought herself clever, timing her water runs to catch glimpses of the mysterious warrior who appeared like a ghost at the creek's edge. Now, cornered and alone, she realized how foolish she had been. "The water runs cleaner here," she stammered, lifting her chin despite the trembling in her voice. Coyote stepped closer, his movement fluid as a predator's. He was magnificent, taller than any man in Millfield Township, with warrior braids adorned, with eagle feathers and scars that spoke of battles won. His dark eyes held secrets that made her pulse race. "You lie, white woman." His lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "You watch me as I watch you." Heat flooded Celestin's cheeks. She had been watching, studying the way he moved through the forest, the careful ritual of his morning prayers, the gentleness with which he tended to his paint horse. Everything about him contradicted what the townspeople whispered about savage Indians. "My father will send men if I don't return," she warned, though they both knew it was an empty threat. Elijah Whitmore barely noticed his daughter existed, too consumed with expanding his land claims to care about her morning wanderings. Coyote reached out, his calloused fingers grazing her chin. "Your father takes our hunting grounds piece by piece. Soon there will be war." The word hung between them like smoke. Celestin had heard the men talking in hushed tones about increasing tensions, about the Comanche bands growing restless as more settlers pushed west. She had seen the fear in her stepmother's eyes, the way the women clutched their children closer. "Then why haven't you killed me?" she whispered. Something shifted in Coyote's expression, a vulnerability that transformed his harsh features. "Because you are not like them. You see beyond the surface." Before she could respond, he was moving again, circling her with predatory grace. "I am Coyote of the Pennatica Band, son of War Chief Running Eagle. I have counted coup on 30 enemies and taken horses from the Kiowa. Yet I find myself drawn to a white woman who steals moments at dawn." Celestin's world tilted. This wasn't just any warrior, he was royalty among his people, a leader whose very presence could spark the war everyone feared. "What do you want from me?" she breathed. Coyote stopped directly in front of her, so close she could smell the sage smoke in his hair, see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. When he spoke, his words shattered everything she thought she knew about her carefully ordered life. "I want you to be my woman, to bear my sons and teach them your language while I teach them to be warriors. I want you to choose your dying world or a life of purpose with me." The water bucket slipped from her numb fingers, clattering to the ground as the impossible weight of his proposal settled over her like a thundercloak. Celestin stared at Coyote as if he had spoken in tongues, her mind reeling from the audacity of his proposal. Around them, the morning birds fell silent, as if nature itself held its breath for her answer. "You're insane," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Deep in her chest, something wild and untamed stirred a part of her she had buried beneath years of proper comportment and suffocating expectations. Coyote's eyes never left her face. "Am I? You have 17 winters, yet your father has not found you a husband. Your stepmother treats you like a servant. You wither in that place of wood and lies." Each word hit like an arrow finding its mark. Celestin wanted to deny it, but couldn't. Since her mother's death 5 years ago, she had become invisible in her own home, useful only for tending to her half-siblings, while Adelaide, her father's new wife, played the perfect frontier matron. "You know nothing about my life," she protested weakly. "I know you speak to the meadowlarks in the morning. I know you weep when you think no one watches. I know you dream of something more than becoming another man's broodmare in a settlement that smells of defeat." The accuracy of his observations made her step backward, but the oak tree blocked her retreat. Coyote moved closer, his presence overwhelming yet strangely comforting. "How long have you been watching me?" she demanded. "3 moons. Since the day you fought the preacher's son for trying to drown kittens in the creek." His smile was fierce with approval. "You have the heart of a warrior, Celestin Whitmore." Her name on his lips sounded different, not the sharp syllables her stepmother spat, but something musical and precious. She realized she didn't even know how he knew her name, yet he spoke it like a prayer. "This is madness," she said, but her treacherous heart was already considering impossible possibilities. "My people would never accept it." "Your people would never accept me. My people respect strength and honor. You have both." Coyote reached into the pouch at his belt, withdrawing something that made her breath catch. It was a necklace of intricate beadwork, turquoise and silver, that caught the morning light like captured sky. "This belonged to my grandmother, soaring dove. She chose love over safety, following my grandfather from the plains to the mountains when her tribe said it was forbidden." Celestin couldn't tear her eyes from the necklace. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen, each bead placed with reverent care, telling a story she longed to understand. "If you come with me," Coyote continued, his voice dropping to something almost tender, "I will make you my first wife. You will want for nothing. Our children will be raised to walk between both worlds, strong enough to survive what comes, wise enough to build bridges instead of walls." "First wife?" Celestin's eyes snapped to his. "There would be others? It is our way. A war chief must have strong alliances through marriage." His expression was matter of fact, but she caught something else there, a flicker of uncertainty. "But you would be honored above all others. The mother of my heirs." The practical part of her mind cataloged all the reasons this was impossible. She would be leaving everything she had ever known for a life that existed only in campfire stories and fevered dreams. She would be abandoning her younger siblings to Adelaide's cold mercies. She would become a savage in the eyes of everyone she had ever called neighbor. But another part of her, the part that had always felt like a caged bird, whispered seductive possibilities, adventure, purpose. A man who saw her as more than a burden to be married off at the first opportunity. "I need time," she said finally. Coyote studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "The new moon comes in 7 suns. Meet me here at dawn on that day, and I will have your answer." He pressed the necklace into her palm, his fingers warm against her skin. "Wear this if you choose yes. Leave it here if you choose the safety of your cage." Without another word, he melted back into the forest, leaving Celestin alone with racing thoughts and a piece of sky-colored destiny clutched in her trembling hand. The necklace felt like molten fire against Celestin's skin as she hid it beneath her modest dress, the beads pressing into her flesh like a secret heartbeat. 7 days stretched before her like an eternity, each moment weighted with the impossible decision Coyote had placed in her hands. She tried to lose herself in familiar routines, helping Adelaide with the washing, teaching letters to her half-sister, Prudence, tending the kitchen garden, but everything felt surreal, as if she were watching someone else live her life. The settlement's wooden walls seemed to close in tighter each day, the familiar faces of neighbors appearing suddenly foreign and small. On the 3rd day, her father made an announcement that sent ice through her veins. "Cornelius Ashworth has asked for your hand. Elijah Whitmore declared over their meager supper, not bothering to look up from his plate. "He's agreed to a modest dowry, considering your age." Celestin's spoon clattered to the table. Cornelius was the blacksmith's eldest son, a man of 40 winters with yellowed teeth and wandering hands who had already buried 2 wives in childbirth. The thought of his thick fingers touching her made bile rise in her throat. "Father, the matter is settled." Elijah's voice carried the flat finality of a man accustomed to absolute authority. "You'll marry him come Sunday after church service. Adelaide will help you prepare." Adelaide's smile was sharp as a blade. "It's past time you made yourself useful, girl. The Lord knows you've been burden enough to this household." That night, Celestin lay awake staring at the rough-hewn ceiling. Coyote's necklace warm against her throat beneath her nightgown. 4 more days until the new moon. 4 more days before she had to choose between a life of slow death with Cornelius Ashworth and an uncertain future that called to her soul like wind through canyon walls. She rose before dawn, slipping from the house like a ghost to meet the sunrise at the creek. Coyote wasn't there, but she felt his presence in the stirring leaves. In the way the morning mist seemed to whisper her name, she pressed her fingers to the hidden necklace and made her first real decision. The next morning brought more complications. Prudence, her 10-year-old half-sister, caught her fingering the necklace's edge. "What's that, Celestin?" Prudence asked with the devastating directness of childhood. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just a button." Celestin's heart hammered as she tugged. The beadwork deeper beneath her collar. But Prudence's sharp eyes had already seen too much. "It's pretty. Like the Indian jewelry Mama saw at the trading post. She said it was devil's work." Fear crept up Celestin's spine. If Adelaide discovered the necklace, there would be questions she couldn't answer without destroying everything. 4th day brought a commotion that changed everything. A rider thundered into Millfield just after noon, his horse lathered with sweat and foam. Celestin watched from the garden as men gathered around him in the town square, their voices rising in angry murmurs. "Comanche raiding party hit the Jameson place," the messenger shouted. "Burned them out and took their livestock. They're moving. North, maybe a dozen strong." Terror rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Women clutched their children tighter while men reached for rifles that hadn't been fired in anger for months. Celestin felt the world tilting beneath her feet as she realized the implications. That evening, her father's voice carried new steel as he addressed the family. "We're moving the wedding up. Tomorrow morning, soon as the preacher can manage. Can't risk leaving you unwed with savages on the prowl." Celestin's last thread of hope snapped. One day. She had 1 day left before chains of matrimony bound her forever to a life that would slowly drain the light from her soul. 1 day to find the courage that might save her. That night, she made her second decision. She would go to Coyote at dawn, not to give him her answer, but to ask the question that had been burning in her chest since their first meeting. Did he know about the raids? Was his proposal part of some larger plan to use her against her own people? And if it was, would that change the desperate hunger in her heart for something real and wild and free? The necklace felt heavier than ever as she closed her eyes and tried to sleep, knowing that tomorrow would determine the shape of all her remaining days. Dawn broke gray and troubled, matching the storm clouds gathering in Celestin's chest as she crept through the settlement's sleeping streets. The creek beckoned beyond the tree line, and with it, answers she both craved and feared. Coyote was waiting, but something had changed. Gone was the confident warrior who had cornered her. A week ago, in his place stood a man whose shoulders carried the weight of difficult choices, his dark eyes reflecting a pain that made her heart clench. "You came," he said simply, but she heard the relief beneath his careful words. "The Jameson farm," Celestin said without preamble. "Was that your doing?" His jaw tightened. My war party brothers grow impatient with my distraction. They struck without my knowledge. But you're their leader. How could they? Because I have been meeting with a white woman instead of planning raids. The words exploded from him. Like a dam bursting. My own cousin, striking Wolf, questions my judgment. He says I have been bewitched, that I think with my heart instead of my head. Celestin stepped closer, seeing the torment in his features. And have you been bewitched? Coyote's laugh was bitter as winter wind. If loving you is a spell, then yes. I am thoroughly cursed. He reached for her, his hands framing her face with desperate tenderness. But it changes nothing. My offer stands. My father is marrying me off today, she whispered, to a man who will use me until I break. Something dangerous flickered in Coyote's eyes. Then we leave now. My horse is swift, and I know paths your people cannot follow. The simplicity of... It stole her breath. No grand speeches, no elaborate plans, just a warrior's direct solution to an impossible problem. But complications tangled around her heart like thorns. My sister Prudence saw your necklace. If I disappear, they'll know. They'll come after us with every man and gun in 3 counties. Let them come. Coyote's voice carried the confidence of a man who had never lost a battle. We will be far beyond their reach by sunset. And my people? When your warriors see me wearing their enemy's face, what then? She searched his eyes, needing truth more than comfort. Will they accept me, or will I spend my life as an outsider in both worlds? Coyote was quiet for a long moment, his hands sliding down to grip her shoulders. When he spoke, his honesty was both brutal and beautiful. Some will never accept you. They will call you ghost woman, devil bride. Your children will face challenges mine never would. His grip tightened. But those who matter, the wise ones, the strong ones, they will see what I see. A woman with the courage to choose love over safety, adventure over comfort. Behind them, the sound of church bells began to ring, calling Millfield to worship and witness her marriage to Cornelius Ashworth. The sound felt like a death knell, each peal driving nails into the coffin of her dreams. There's something else, Coyote said, his voice dropping to barely more than a whisper. The raids will escalate. My people have endured the white man's promises too many times, seen too many treaties broken. War is coming whether I choose it or not. Celestin felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. And why ask me to join you? Why put me in the middle of that storm? Because I am selfish enough to want something beautiful to fight for instead of just something to fight against. His eyes blazed with an intensity that made her knees weak. Because in you, I see the future children who can speak both languages, who can understand both sides, who might one day build bridges where we could only build walls. The church bells grew louder, joined now by voices calling her name. Adelaide's. Shrill tones cut through the morning air like a blade. Celestin, where are you, ungrateful girl? Decision time had arrived with the brutality of a lightning strike. Coyote stepped back, giving her space to choose, but his eyes never left her face. I won't force you, he said quietly. But if you come with me now, you come as my equal. My wife, not my captive. The mother of chiefs, not a possession to be bartered. Celestin looked toward the settlement where her father waited to hand her over to Cornelius Ashworth like a piece of property. Then she looked at Coyote, dangerous, beautiful, offering her a life that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Her hands went to the necklace, pulling it from beneath her dress so that the turquoise beads caught the morning light like promises. Will you give me your heart and raise my heirs? She asked, turning his own words back to him. Coyote's smile could have lit the dawn. Until the mountains crumble and the rivers run dry. She stepped into his arms, feeling the last chains of her old life fall away as church bells sang Coyote's paint horse, Windrunner, stretched his legs across the prairie like liquid thunder, carrying them away from everything Celestin had ever known. She clung to the warrior's broad back, her arms wrapped around his waist, feeling simultaneously terrified and more alive than she had ever been. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew fainter with each mile, shouting voices, the thunder of hooves. Her father's rage echoing across the grassland like a storm that couldn't quite catch up. Ahead lay nothing but endless sky and the promise of a life beyond her wildest imaginings. "Where are we going?" she called over the wind. "The winter camp, 2 days' hard ride north," Coyote replied without slowing. "My grandmother waits there. She will prepare you." "Prepare me for what?" His laughter rumbled through his chest. "To be Comanche." They rode through the day, stopping only to water the horse and share jerky from Coyote's provisions. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold, he finally slowed Windrunner to a walk. "We make camp here," he announced, guiding the horse toward a grove of cottonwoods beside a clear stream. "Tomorrow we enter Comanche lands proper." As they dismounted, Celestin felt the enormity of what she had done settling over her like a heavy blanket. She had abandoned everything, her family, her faith, her entire world for a man she barely knew and a future she couldn't imagine. Coyote must have sensed her turmoil, because he moved to her side with the silent grace she was beginning to recognize as distinctly his. "Regrets?" he asked quietly. Celestin considered the question, watching him unsaddle Windrunner with practiced efficiency. Did she regret leaving Prudence behind? Yes. Did she regret escaping marriage to Cornelius Ashworth? Never, not regrets, she said. Finally, fear. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Coyote began gathering wood for a fire. Tell me what frightens you most. The question caught her off guard with its directness. In her world, people danced around uncomfortable truths, hiding behind politeness and propriety. Here, under the vast prairie sky with this magnificent savage who had stolen her from her fate, honesty seemed like the only reasonable currency. "That I'll disappoint you," she admitted. "That I'm not strong enough for the life you're offering." Coyote paused in his fire building, fixing her with those dark eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. "You chose freedom over safety. You chose love over security. You left everything you knew for a man who could offer you nothing but uncertainty and adventure." He struck flint to tinder, coaxing flame from spark. "If that is not strength, then—" The word has no meaning. As night fell around their small camp, they sat beside the fire, sharing more of his provisions and talking in ways Celestin had never talked with anyone. Coyote told her about his childhood, about learning to hunt from his father and listening to his grandmother's stories of the old days when the Comanche ruled the southern plains unchallenged. She found herself telling him about her mother's death, about feeling invisible in her father's house, about the dream she had never dared speak. Aloud dreams of travel and adventure and a life that mattered beyond the confines of a kitchen and nursery. "In our tribe," Coyote said as the fire burned low, "women are not property. They choose their husbands, own their belongings, speak in council when wisdom is needed." His eyes found hers across the dancing flames. "You will not be diminished. Among my people, Celestin, you will be elevated." When it came time to sleep, Coyote spread his buffalo robe on the ground and gestured for her to take it. She hesitated, sudden shyness overwhelming her. "We are not married yet," he said gently, understanding her reluctance. "I will not dishonor you before the proper ceremonies." "When?" she asked. "When will we marry?" "When my grandmother judges you ready. When you have learned our ways enough to choose them freely." His smile was soft in the firelight. "A Comanche marriage is not a treaty between fathers, little wildcat. It is a joining of equals." Celestin settled onto the soft buffalo hide, pulling his second blanket around her shoulders. Above them, stars wheeled across the vast sky in patterns she had never noticed from within the walls of Millfield. Everything seemed bigger here. The sky, the land, the possibilities stretching ahead of them like an unwritten story. "Coyote?" She called softly. "Yes, thank you. For seeing something in me worth saving." His voice came through the darkness, warm as the dying embers of their fire. "I did not save you, brave woman. You saved yourself. I merely provided the horse." As sleep claimed her, Celestin dreamed of turquoise skies and children with dark eyes who spoke 2 languages and called her mother in a tongue she was just beginning to understand. The Comanche winter camp rose from the prairie like a vision. From another world, dozens of buffalo hide lodges arranged in careful patterns that spoke of ancient wisdom and deep community bonds. Smoke from cooking fires painted lazy spirals against the morning sky, while children's laughter mingled with the sound of horses and the daily rhythm of life lived close to the earth. Celestin's heart hammered against her ribs as Windrunner carried them through the outer ring of lodges. Every eye seemed to turn toward them, some curious, some hostile, all measuring the white woman who rode behind their war chief like she belonged there. "Steady," Coyote murmured, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "Show no fear. They respect strength above all else." At the camp's heart stood the largest lodge, its hide painted with symbols that seemed to move in the shifting light. An ancient woman emerged from its entrance, her face a map of years lived with purpose and dignity. Silver hair fell in long braids decorated with feathers and beads, and her dark eyes held the sharp intelligence of a hawk. "Grandmother," Coyote said, dismounting and helping Celestin down with careful ceremony. "I bring you the woman I spoke of." The old woman soaring dove, Celestin realized with a start of recognition, circled them slowly, her gaze never leaving Celestin's face. When she spoke, it was in rapid Comanche that made Coyote straighten with surprise. "She says you have eyes like winter storms," he translated, "and a spine like a lightning rod. She asks if you are ready to die to your old self and be born Numinu, one of the people." The weight of the moment settled over Celestin like a ceremonial robe. Around them, the entire camp had gathered to witness this first meeting. Children peered from behind their mothers' skirts, while warriors stood with arms crossed, their expressions unreadable. "Tell her," Celestin said, lifting her chin and meeting Soaring Dove's piercing gaze directly, "that I am ready to learn what it means to live." Something shifted in the old woman's expression, approval, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit. She spoke again, this time including gestures that needed no translation. "You will come to her lodge," Coyote interpreted. "She will teach you our ways, our language, the skills you need to be a proper wife to a war chief. When she judges you ready, we will marry in the old way." "How long?" Celestin asked. Soaring Dove's answer came with a sly smile that transformed her weathered features. "As long as it takes," Coyote translated with a chuckle. "Grandmother says spirits cannot be rushed, but eagles learn to fly quickly when they are ready to soar." The next weeks passed in a blur of learning that stretched Celestin's mind and body in ways she had never imagined. Soaring Dove was a patient but demanding teacher, showing her how to tan hides, prepare foods that had no names in English, and craft the intricate beadwork that turned clothing into art. More challenging was learning the language, not just the words, but the rhythm and flow of Comanche speech, the subtle meanings that shifted with tone and context. Celestin threw herself into the lessons with desperate determination, knowing that communication was the bridge between her old world and her new one. "Your tongue is clumsy as a newborn colt," Soaring Dove said one afternoon as they worked side by side preparing pemmican, "but your spirit learns quickly. This is good." The old woman's English was better than she had initially let on, Celestin had discovered. Like much about her new life, Things were more complex than they first appeared. Was it difficult for you? Celestin asked, carefully, when you married your husband from the mountain people? Soaring Dove's hands never paused in their work, but her expression grew distant with memory. I was your age when I chose love over safety. My father said I was throwing away my birthright for a man who would never truly understand our ways. She looked up, meeting Celestin's eyes. He was wrong about the understanding, right about the difficulty. Love is not enough by itself, you must build it into something stronger each day. As the weeks passed, Celestin felt herself changing in ways both subtle and profound. Her hands grew calloused from real work, her body strong from physical labor that demanded everything she had. More importantly, her sense of self expanded beyond the narrow boundaries that had defined her entire life. She was no longer just Elijah Whitmore's difficult daughter or Adelaide's unwanted burden. Here, she was Coyote's chosen woman, Soaring Dove's student, a bridge between worlds. The children who had initially stared at her with suspicious eyes now ran to her with bright smiles, chattering in Comanche and laughing when she tried to respond. But not everyone in the camp had accepted her presence. Striking Wolf Coyote's cousin and war party second made his disapproval clear through cold stares and pointed comments about white treachery that didn't require translation to sting. The confrontation came on a crisp autumn morning when Celestin was returning from the river with water for the morning meal. Striking Wolf blocked her path, his hand resting meaningfully on his knife hilt. "You do not belong here, ghost woman," he said in careful English. "You bring bad medicine to our people." Celestin felt fear coil in her stomach, but Soaring Dove's lessons had included more than crafts and language. She had learned about dignity, about standing strong in the face of challenge. "I belong where Coyote says I belong," she replied steadily. "If you question that, take it up with him." Striking Wolf's smile was thin as a blade edge. "Perhaps I will." That afternoon, the drums began to beat. The drums called the entire camp to witness what would determine Celestin's fate and future among the people. In the sacred circle at the camp's heart, Striking Wolf stood with his supporters while Coyote faced them across the firelit space, the ancient traditions of challenge and response playing out as they had for generations beyond memory. Celestin watched from beside Soaring Dove, her heart hammering as rapid Comanche flew between the men accusations, defenses, and challenges that needed no translation to understand their deadly seriousness. "What are they saying?" she whispered. Soaring Dove's weathered hand found hers, offering strength through touch. "Striking Wolf claims you are a spy sent to weaken us from within. He demands trial by combat to prove your worth or see you cast out forever." Ice flooded Celestin's veins. "Combat? But I'm not a warrior. Not you, child. You're champion." The old woman's eyes never left the circle. "Coyote fights for the right to keep you. If he loses, she didn't need to finish. If Coyote lost, Celestin would be banished to wander between worlds, belonging to neither, accepted by none." Or were some challenges among the Comanche ended only with death? In the circle, Coyote spoke with the controlled fury of a man pushed beyond his limits. His words rang with authority and passion, silencing even his critics with their power. When he finished, a murmur ran through the gathered crowd, approval mixed with concern. "He accepts the challenge," Soaring Dove translated, "but he demands the stakes be raised. Winner takes all leadership of the war party, choice of targets, and the right to determine the woman's fate." Celestin's breath caught. Coyote wasn't just fighting for her now, he was gambling his entire position, his future among his people, on this single combat. If he lost, both their dreams would die in the dust of the sacred circle. Striking Wolf's response came with a warrior's grin that promised violence. Around the circle, men began placing bets with the casual enthusiasm of those about to witness blood sport. "I have to stop this," Celestin said, starting to rise, but Soaring Dove's grip tightened like a vice. You will dishonor him and yourself. This is the way it has always been among the people. Trust in his strength and your own worth. The combatants stripped to breechclouts and moccasins, their bodies painted with symbols of power and protection. Both men were magnificent specimens. Of Comanche warrior culture, Coyote slightly taller and broader through the shoulders, Striking Wolf faster and more compact, like a coiled spring ready to unleash destruction. They circled each other in the firelight, knives gleaming as extensions of their will. The crowd fell silent except for the whisper of moccasins on earth and the harsh breathing of men about to test. Fate against steel. Striking Wolf attacked first, his blade seeking Coyote's ribs in a lightning thrust that would have ended most fights before they began. But Coyote flowed away from the strike like smoke, his own weapon tracing a line across his cousin's forearm that drew first blood. What followed was a deadly dance older than memory. Thrust and parry, feint and counter, two masters of their craft pushing each other to the very edges of skill and endurance. Both men bled from multiple cuts, their movements growing more desperate as exhaustion began to take its toll. Then Striking Wolf overextended on a killing thrust, leaving himself open for the space of a heartbeat. Coyote's blade found his throat, pressing just hard enough to draw blood while his free hand trapped his cousin's knife arm. Yield, Coyote commanded, his voice carrying across the silent circle. For a moment that lasted forever, the outcome hung in the balance. Then Striking Wolf's weapon fell to the earth, and he nodded once in acknowledgement of defeat. The challenge is answered, the tribal elder announced. Coyote speaks for the war party. Coyote chooses the woman's fate. As the crowd began to disperse, some disappointed at the lack of a death, others relieved that blood feuds wouldn't split the band, Coyote walked to where Celestin stood with Soaring Dove. His chest bore 3 shallow cuts that would leave scars, and exhaustion lined his features, but his eyes blazed with triumph and something deeper, a love that had been tested and proven true. Are you ready? He asked simply. Celestin looked around at the camp that had become home, at the people who had accepted her through fire and challenge, at the old woman who had taught her that strength came in many forms. Then she looked at the man who had fought for the right to love her. I've been ready since the moment you asked, she said. The wedding ceremony took place 3 days later under the full moon, with the entire camp gathered to witness the joining of war chief and white woman in bonds that transcended the boundaries of blood and culture. Celestin wore traditional Comanche wedding dress crafted by Soaring Dove's patient hands, her grandmother's turquoise necklace gleaming against bronzed skin painted with symbols of fertility and protection. When the sacred words were spoken and the ritual sharing completed, Coyote lifted her onto Windrunner's back, and they rode out together under stars that sang their names to the wind. In years to come, their children would be born into a world caught between old ways and new realities. They would speak both languages fluently, serve as bridges between warring peoples, and carry the legacy of a love that had been strong enough to rewrite destiny itself. But on that night, as prairie wind carried the scent of sage and possibility across the endless grassland, Celestin knew only that she had found her home in the arms of a man who had seen her true heart and chosen to claim it as his own. Behind them, the campfires burned like earthbound stars, marking the place where a frightened white woman had died and a Comanche warrior's wife had been born. Ahead lay all the tomorrows they would build together, one choice at a time, one sunrise at a time, one beat of 2 hearts becoming one. The drums sang their victory too.